Welcome to your Barbados Today evening news update for Wednesday, September 16. A regional economist says government's decision to pause on its debt reduction as it seeks to address a number of challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic is a good idea. And while Dr. Justin Ram welcomed the move, saying it makes sense, he also suggested that the government may have to engage in more borrowing and shift expenditures as it seeks to keep the economy stable. On Tuesday, Governor-General Dame Sandra Mason, in her throne speech, said, given that the International Monetary Fund backed Barbados' Economic Recovery and Transformation Program provided some measure of flexibility, the initial debt target would be put on pause until 2022. Dr. Ram tells Barbados Today the move would allow government some funds that could help pay down debt and support the economy.
For me, this is if a government cannot do that in this point in time, it would be very difficult for the economy to ever recover. So I think it makes sense. What the government has to be clear of, however, is to say to the population, when does it plan to get back on track to meet its long-term debt target, which I don't know, I imagine that they're keeping that debt target of 60% of debt GDP by 2033. So it means maybe after a year or two, they are going to have to increase the primary balance again. Perhaps I think this is where the focus should be, is on growth reform to try to grow the economy significantly. Because if we could get this economy growing by 3 to 5% per annum, that would help bring down the debt to GDP a lot quicker. Okay. But in the short term, we know that they're not going to be able to grow the economy so quickly. So the only alternative is for them to support the economy at this time.
Monday's start of the new school year is seemingly moving full steam ahead. Today, Education Minister Cynthia Bradshaw and other ministry officials met with parents and guardians to discuss concerns on the reopening amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. At the end of the first session of talks, Bradshaw said parents appeared happy that schools were reopening, albeit with the underlying concerns as a result of the current environment.
Not too pleased about the number of PTA representation that we have across the country, and it is something that I believe that we have to work towards ensuring that we have more parents coming forward at the various schools to be able to engage with teachers, to engage with the principals, and certainly to engage with the ministry on issues related to education and to the education of the students generally. Overall, though, parents, I think, are happy to know that school is reopening. They're pleased to be able to get the children back into the school environment. Obviously, there are underlying concerns about the timetabling. You have a couple of parents who have more than one child at different schools, so they're obviously trying to balance how are they going to be able to ensure that they're able to have persons looking after the children if they're doing the online environment. And many of them are obviously concerned too about transportation, looking at the issue of being able to have the children commuting on the buses and making sure that they're safe. We've given certain assurances as it relates to the cleaning of the schools, the sanitization of the environment. We've had training just last week of the ancillary staff.
Meantime, the minister acknowledged some of the difficulties that may hinder parents given the COVID-19 environment, but she stressed that concerns should be directed to the ministry.
Parents have to communicate concerns to the leadership of institutions. While we set a framework, obviously parents have to be able to indicate where there are challenges. And where there are challenges, we are flexible enough to adapt and to put arrangements in place to be able to deal with it. The parents have to be told children need to be in school unless there is a satisfactory explanation as to why they cannot be there. And they need to communicate that to the Ministry of Education through the principals of the respective institutions. We cannot have children just not attending schools because parents don't don't want them to go. And therefore that communication needs to take place at all levels to ensure that children get an opportunity to be in school as much as possible. They've just simply lost too much time, and I really do feel, and I would appeal to parents to ensure that they're, whatever they need to do to speak with the principals, that they need to do so that if there are challenges in terms of economic hardship or issues with transportation, that the Ministry of Education is made aware, so that between ourselves and certainly the ministry responsible for welfare, that we are able to put the necessary mechanisms in place to get children to school.
There's been an increase in the number of parents seeking assistance from the Salvation Army with sending their children back to school. The Army's Divisional Business Manager and Public Relations Officer Shoma Evelyn made the disclosure today. However, she says only 100 families will receive assistance this year based on a donation of $10,000 worth of vouchers from ABEDS and CIBC First Caribbean International Bank.
The need is still very, very great. What we have found is that persons are coming, people that we don't normally see, come. Sorry. And the need for clothing, uniforms, textbooks, a simple thing, not even a simple thing, but also for can be assisted with your child with a tablet or a laptop. We have had also persons from secondary school and tertiary institutions asking for some of that same assistance. Not for uniforms, of course, but for the writing material and so forth.
A second child tests positive for COVID-19 after arriving in the country. The visitor, an 8-year-old girl who arrived on British Airways yesterday, is now in isolation. The child, who is asymptomatic, was accompanied by her parents, who both tested negative. Her case brings the number of confirmed cases in the country to 185. Meanwhile, the number of people in isolation decreases to 7, as 2 people will be discharged from isolation today after recovering from the virus. 171 people have recovered from COVID-19. The other child who tested positive this week was a 12-year-old Jamaican girl who arrived there on Monday on board a Caribbean Airlines flight from Jamaica.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from our regional neighbors now in Jamaica, there is an urgent call for social intervention of at-risk youth in some volatile communities in Clarendon, especially in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. We get more in this report from Television Jamaica.
The leadership of the Clarendon Police is worried that more youth could be drawn into lives of crime now that many of them are at home without any prospect of work or training stemming from the COVID-19 imposed restrictions.
When they were at school, we weren't able to contain them. What will happen now? They're prepared to stay home, and so we anticipate some challenges there. But I want to put it to the committee to say what is the priority that they will give to, youth engagement, youth development. How can we save some of these youngsters?
Superintendent of Police Christopher Phillips pointed to the recent incident in Effortville, Clarendon, when 6 young men were cut down by the security forces for alleged involvement in gang activity. He says he does not want to see that fate for any more of the parish's youth and called for social intervention.
Since I came here, I have observed that a number of our youths are involved in criminal activities, when I did my initial assessment of the wanted person listing in Clarendon, I realized that it was the average age group was about 22 thereabout, which is also a concern.
And finally, on the international front, Hurricane Sally crashed into the southern U.S., bringing torrential rain and storm surges, uprooting trees, flooding streets, and cutting power to hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses. The system, now a tropical storm, made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane. More in this report from Reuters TV.
Sally uprooted trees, flooded streets, and left hundreds of thousands of people without power on the Alabama-Florida coast Wednesday. Sally made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane, bringing winds of up to 105 miles per hour, but was downgraded in the afternoon to a tropical storm with maximum sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center said the storm brought, quote, historic and catastrophic flooding, as some parts of the Gulf Coast were inundated with more than 18 inches of rain over a 24-hour period, and the rain was not expected to stop anytime soon. Gulf Shore, Alabama resident Logan Estill said he rode out the storm.
We started hearing all of our windows start to pop, part of the roof started coming off, and siding was ripping. We just rode it out. About 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we fell asleep and woke up at 9, started walking out.
Walking out to flooded streets, toppled signs, and a damaged gas station. A section of the pier at Gulf Shore State Park was ripped in half. Winds brought down massive trees in downtown Mobile, and torrential rains pummeled a swath of the south coast from Louisiana to Florida. The coastal resort community of Pensacola, Florida, suffered up to 5 feet of flooding, and travel was cut by damaged roads and bridges. Likewise, streets in Florida's Panama City were drowned out.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.